3, 2, and 1. The Palestinian people for over 80 plus years, maybe more, maybe less, have fought so hard for the establishment of their very own nation state. We think at this point in time, the international community should be able to say, yes, we support them. I'm going to talk to you broadly about two main extensions. First, on why this will actually help the most vulnerable actors in this motion, i.e. all the Palestinians and people living in that location in the first place. And second, I want to extend or impact what my partner said, Kuya Joseph, about this principle that we have on nationalism and why that inherently is something that's going to be good. Then lastly, I'll wait. First, before that, a few rebuttals to Leader of Opposition. Number one, we do think that nationalism is a value that we have to defend and that we are proud to defend. But that comes later on when Palestinians already have that state to begin with. We recognize the infighting between Hamas and Fatah, but it all begins with a ceasefire. A lot of LO clash was preempted already by my Prime Minister. Secondly, if OO's clash is on who will lead, this gives OG an already path to victory because we answered that already. We tell you that a lot of their qualms are contingent on Israel and Palestine having concessions. As Tiger said, true diplomacy only happens when we push Israel to see that Palestine is an equal towards their very state. Because if we don't agree to that at the very least, then why would Israel bend? Why would Israel say that, oh, they're going to be far more likely to be able to say yes? Lastly, they said that there is no necessarily, Third, they said that there's going to be no necessarily political control on Palestine and there's no centralized state of power. We tell you that arguably the international community also has some burden and responsibility to at least help Palestine alleviate or go out of that position in the first place. We tell you if we don't have it right now, the international community can probably help. Second, Israel will probably be mad. And you know what? Yeah, they probably will be. But who cares? As what my partner said, we don't necessarily care about the ramifications of how Israel will react. We tell you that the international community should be more prone to Israel as opposed to prone to Palestine as opposed to Israel. Lastly, they said that they're not going to stay in status quo. Eventually though, if ideally, in an ideal world, right, we actually get to the point where peace already exists in that region, how is it going to happen if Israel at the very least, doesn't recognize the Palestinian state to begin with? We tell you that in order for peace to happen, in order for status quo to actually change, we need to be able to push the burden towards Israel to make Palestine a place. What is my extension? Why it will create a space for the most vulnerable people affected by the war, by the current conflict right now. What's the problem in status quo? Three things. The first, this war has affected hundreds upon thousands of people on both sides, both Israelis and Palestinians. Two, countless people have been displaced and have had to leave their homes because it has been destroyed or been occupied or been bombed to the hell of it. Third, general quality of life in the area has worsened, which has led to two major things. The first is massive loss of human welfare, and second is this perpetual forever war within the territory, if not this, then the previous 4 conflicts that already existed in the past. Why does this recognition help them? It helps them in 3 distinct ways. The first is that at its worst, right, if nothing happens, if we don't actually get peace in the middle, peace within Israel-Palestine, it at least gives these people hope. The Palestinian people hope that over however long that they have fought for their nation and state, it's finally turning towards them, that the bend towards the international community will finally take them seriously. Second, it galvanizes people in order to better donate, or at least creates polarization and creates, people who are going to be far more invested, at least in this, now that the international community and every single person in the entire world knows that Palestine is already a state. I mean, that's pretty big news, right? And the third is that it alleviates, to at least a certain extent, the xenophobia and the refugee crisis that is currently happening in status quo. All these things come as a result of these people having to leave their homes and having to go towards other territories in other countries, which is precisely something that a lot of countries don't necessarily want, right? They don't want a lot of refugees and a lot of minority people from Palestine to be able to go to their countries, just not within their means. We tell you that this reduces the pressure for these other countries who are already desperate in order to give them some amount of leeway so that they don't have to deal with that. What are the impacts of this extension? Number one, it leads to, at worst case, right? It gives the Palestinian people the most important validation of all, that their fight was is not supposed to be in vain. Second is that it necessarily pressures the international community in order to support the Palestinian state. We fully understand that it might not work right now, or there might very be a longer process than we might expect. But at least on our side, we will eventually get to that place, as opposed to this veil of we don't know what's going to happen that exists in status quo. And really quickly, we tell you that the Palestinian state offers these people a space for the Palestinian nation, right? And this is where I want to highlight Joseph's case. OG's main case line is on the principle of sovereignty and self-determination. We tell you that, principally speaking, people who belong to a nation and have the vested interest to live in a state ought to have been given that, as is already seen towards Palestine's attempts in the past to make that state a reality. The difference between what we want right now and what they want is that Palestine already has credible and legitimate components to all the necessary components of a state, i.e. they do have a population, they do have claims to land, they do have sovereignty, and all of that things. We tell you that it's legitimately right for them to be given that. Why do we win this debate? Two main reasons. Number one, on actor interest. The international community takes decisive action and creates more leeway for them to curtail all of the economic harms, as what my partner said. And more importantly, more than the economic benefit, these very Palestinians need a place, which is, by the way, what we propose. We tell you that this needs to happen right now, and the international community has an interest to make it happen. So for all of those reasons, proud.